Hey everyone, today I want to talk to you about the Chaotic Dark Muninn and what I'm flying these days in 2025. Similar to my Dark Ikitursa fit guide, I have a baseline fit on the screen now. This Muninn that you actually see me flying here is a lot closer to this baseline. I cannibalized a lot of my old armor ships going into 2025, so I actually have B-type membranes here, but I really would recommend the A-type coatings. They're a good bit cheaper and very comparable in tank. And then once the Legion expansion goes live, the A-types will be more than fine. As always, my philosophy when designing these baselines is to find a setup that is reasonable on investment, not too cheap, but also not overly expensive. There are plenty of places where you could actually save ISK on this setup and go cheaper, and there's definitely places where you can put more ISK into it, but I think where we're at right now is very reasonable. You're going to get a consistent 4 runs per hour, and overall it's just a strong workhorse of a ship. This is what I'm flying for the Muninn these days, but really all of the fits on my Streamlet and in our Abyssal Lurkers message of the day, more than viable and no change there. What has changed is market prices, because you know how items are sourced in the game. A fit might go up and down in price, completely independent of what is going on in the Abyss. The active Hardener setups still definitely have strengths over this fit, but those active armor hardeners, when I promoted the cheap baseline fit, were about 90 mil a pop, and now they've gone upwards of 300 to 400 mil. So I definitely don't like that type of investment for what I get out of it, because as an example, we have a kinetic hole that we have to address, whereas this is just kind of better all around. And where we were gaining an edge with the active hardeners, we have enough tank here. Why you don't see me promoting an ultra cheap Muninn fit here is when I did that previously, it ultimately attracted pilots that the super cheap fits were not really designed for. The Muninn hull is a great base hull, and you can honestly get away with a lot of Tech 2 modules, but what I found was new players wanted to go to that cheap setup, and it definitely does not work for them. So I'm kind of changing how I promote fits these days, and definitely just sticking with reasonable and not trying to prove how cheap it can be. If you're interested in that, definitely give the Muninn a try, because it can be very surprising. Of the heavy assault missile launcher hacks that you can fly in high tier Dark, I personally prefer the Muninn, but the reality is all of them, the Cerb and the Sacrilege, they're all going to do a consistent 4 runs per hour, 4 full runs per hour, with the same set of drugs, same investment level. So when deciding which of the hulls makes sense for you, go with what you're most skilled in first, and then decide based on what you enjoy and prefer, because at the end of the day, you're going to have you're going to be stronger in some rooms, and then the opposite fit might be weaker in those rooms but stronger in others. Where the Muninn is traditionally weakest is the Overmind on screen here, just because your potential damage is lower than the Cerb or Sacrilege, but your traditionally slow missile rooms, you have a higher average runtime, a faster average runtime, because you have the baked-in Muninn application bonus, which, if you're not tracking it, it's essentially like having the application effect from mid-grade Hydras for free, which is great. We can't always take advantage of it, though, similar to where, you're not really always taking advantage of the Cerb and Sac range bonuses, especially in Dark. I mean, there are times where you're going to get value out of it, but at the end of the day, these ships are much closer than a lot of people will acknowledge. Why I'm promoting a T5 fit, not a T6 Muninn, same basic logic as the Ikitursa. Tier 6 Dark right now is those filaments are not cheap, but the cruiser rewards don't really improve. So I personally don't think the added operation cost is worth the what will ultimately be a on average slight boost in ISK per hour. If you must have ISK per hour, then definitely consider T6. But for me, T5 makes plenty enough ISK, and I can still have a decent bit of fun. If you want to take the Muninn into T6, really what you need to do is you need to mutate these ballistic control systems. The tank is mostly fine. I mean, obviously put some more money into the tank to make it even better. But yeah, you mainly want to be able to catch up in rooms like the Overmind. The current average runtime for this T5 fit is just under 13 minutes per run. The slowest run that I have right now is just over 15.5 minutes. So it will do a consistent full 4 runs per hour. The difference between this and the Ikitursa is, the Iki can go into run 5 with having consistently more than its average runtime available left on boosters, where the Muninn might go into this 4th run right at the average runtime or slightly below, and ultimately it's up to you if you want to squeeze that in. I'm always going to. And then, something like the Iki might be able to do that with the 6th run, depending on the previous 5 runs. If you're willing to risk part of a run not having boosters, and, I can't decide that for you. I usually don't do that, but yeah. Okay, enough talking about everything other than the baseline fit actually on the screen. So Highslots are going to be very straightforward. We're going to go with Tech 2 heavy assault missile launchers. Some people spring for faction. I personally don't. I don't think the investment value is worth it. Definitely not at T5. I'd argue it's maybe not even worth it at T6. And we're not hurting for fitting at all. So personally, I just don't think it's worth it. But that's ultimately up to you. Mids, again, it's going to be pretty much the same every time. You're going to go Afterburner. You could go down to a Federation Navy or whichever, fleet version of AB is cheaper these days. You're going to go a large cap battery and then dual web. I will say, coming into 2025, I wanted to test or really challenge some of my knowledge on Muninn application and practice, and I think I sacrificed 2 or 3 Munins on Tranquility, just testing various fits, and the short version of my findings is no matter what you do across a bunch of number of runs, dual web wins. You're pretty much always going to be in web range, and as long as you're in web range, the only real downside of webs is their cycle time, but even that is manageable, and you're just going to be at max or close to max application for the majority of your rooms. The main area where there's really any conversation about what's going to change with the fit will be the low slots. What I have here is honestly very similar to what you'll see on the Dark Ikitursa. I'm running A-type armor repper. Again, single repper, go with the nicest one you can. Armor reppers are relatively cheap. Dual A-type coating here. Again, I'm running the B-type membranes on the screen just because I had them available. A-type is coatings are very similar to these B-types. Always, again, just look at the market, see what your ISK is getting you, and make a judgment call on what makes sense. Bidding is not an issue on the Muninn. Go with what works for you. And then I'm going with the Reactive Armor Hardener. Honestly, you probably don't even need this tank module, but if you ever have an armor fit and you're like, I want more tank, and you don't have an RAH, the RAH is the answer. If you prefer, an assault damage control, you could definitely do that here. I personally I don't see the value in it. I know people love it, but it's just not how I play. Definitely no wrong answer. And honestly, if you wanted to make that another ballistic control system, you could. One of the reasons why you see me running the double ballistic control and then the damage rig is because I had just come over from working on my Sacrilege fit, which is going to run a very similar damage setup. And if you don't know, the missile potential damage between the Sac and Muninn is identical. So I figured if this works on the Muninn, then I can make it work on the Sac. Going into the rig slots, we're going with the Tech 2 Bay Loader. The Tech 2 damage rigs are pretty much nearly identical to a Tech 2 low slot damage mod. So that's just, it's a valuable, I think, use of the rig and calibration right there. Again, if you're running faction low slots, then obviously that rig is going to fall behind a little bit, but we're on a 3rd stacking penalty, and this is good enough for what I'm seeing. And then the main portion of this fit that is different from my old Munins is I'm running a single range rig, and honestly, this is a huge quality of life upgrade. I never really have a ghosting trig spawn or a confuser Ephi spawn where I think to myself, I need to swap off of rage due to range. I'm getting currently just over 19 kilometers with rage in this fit, and yeah, in high tier dark, it's enough. It might seem like it's not, but the lowest your range is going to get disrupted down to is 11 kilometers, and that's, again, I might set an orbit at 9 kilometers, and it's plenty fine. For implants and boosters, I'm dual rolling standard boosters here, Exile and Crash. Crash is pretty much non-negotiable. And then between the Exile and the Asclepions, again, similar to the Iki, you need to find a tank that's comfortable for you. I can tell you that this tank is very forgiving. You definitely don't need the Asclepions, but again, I'm okay seeing my tank move. Some people really just don't want to put any thought into their tank at all, so you could just run it on the screen if you're okay with that. And if you don't want to run that Exile, then you could go with nicer Asclepions, or nicer coatings or nicer membranes. There's definitely ways to tailor this to how you prefer to fly. And then drones, I know that technically 5 Hornets is more DPS than 2 Navy Vespas and Navy Hornet, but for the most part, Hornets have some difficulty applying even in the best case scenario in Dark. And they're thin, whereas Navy Vespas we can keep out under tower pressure. And, they do get some decent hits, especially against the larger targets. And they're decent if you want to go get side caches. Whereas with the Dark Iki, I'm never getting side caches. If I know I have time, you'll see me pull in, or you'll see me send a Vespa out and tractor in an extraction node, but I'm never really sitting around thinking, I want a full clear. I just want to get through the room. What you will see me commonly do is send Vespas to the biocache at the start of a room while I'm flying over to a stronger position, and then I'll drop my MTU and just tractor the biocache in and kind of drop anchor and fight in that stronger position. And that'll commonly be a blue cloud or maybe a deviant tower. One more thing about implants is, since I run these fits a good bit, I do have nicer skill hardwirings in this clone, but they are definitely not necessary. We are doing more than fine on time. So again, like everything that I promote, decide what makes sense for you. They are absolutely not required. For my combat loadout at the start of a set, I'm bringing my filaments, the MTU. I bring about 200 nanite paste, and then I bring 2,500 Navy Inferno, Navy Nova, Navy Mjolnir, 2,500 Mjolnir Rage, Inferno Rage, and then I bring 3,200 Nova Rage. You're pretty much going to default on Nova Rage. You'll fire Inferno into Eating Com rooms, so if there's any Eating Com with Concord, just go ahead and load Inferno. You're going to do Inferno for the Overmind armor, and then you will do Mjolnir for Sancha. Again, figuring out if you should run Rage or Navy is really pilot dependent, and that goes with ability and how you fly and skills. On Rogue Drone frigates, Sancha Frigs, Lucid Frigs, if you're not into Blue Cloud, there is value in going to the Navy missiles. For the most part, you're not really going to get disrupted enough to really want to make your decision to swap off of Rage because of that, but these are very similar, and ultimately what matters and what you as a pilot should be tracking in these heavy assault missile boats is your actual volleys required to kill, because if you have great application but you're already overkilling on that last volley, then you can probably dial it back, and the same is true for having so much damage over top of application. If you're overkilling in the same amount of volleys, it's ultimately kind of just lost stats for that specific target. That's pretty much the fit, so let's start talking through these spawns that we have kind of up on screen. I did a set of 4 this morning. I forgot to record or hit save on the middle one, so you're catching 3 of them. But I think the ones that I grabbed here are going to pretty much teach every lesson that we really want to go over. I already have some room overviews out for the Muninn, but same as always, you can just ask me if you want to see a specific room. I can go find it and narrate it and kind of cover what you feel is important. Here we have a Rodiva rune and a 70%. We start right in a speed cloud. As always, speed clouds and dark are just going to cost you time, so I pop this cache, loot it, and then I'm just going to go to the other side of the room. Where we do lose some time here anyways is the spawn, pretty sure hits that speed cloud. Yeah, you've got a Damavic that just hit 14,000 meters per second. And that's just going to throw off their AI, and it's going to take them a little bit of time to get over to me. I could go back and try to cheat and get some damage in there, but I want that spawn away from that cloud, and I'm okay sitting here and just trading some time rather than potentially dip back into that cloud. Whenever you have Rodivas in a room, if you have not kited your current kill target away from the Rodivas, you just need to swap to the Rodivas. Rodivas, Vedmax, and Kikis, you can pretty much no brain throw Rage into them. They're going to apply fully with double web. No fancy flying, you don't have to try to force Sigbloom. For Damavix, if you're in a blue cloud, again, no brain, but if you want to force Sigbloom, if you don't know, some of the, most of the rats in the Abyss, they have what are effectively micro warp drives, and you can apply double web to them and hit them very hard, pretty much for full application. This is what the Hydra Cerb is doing, and it's what the Sacrilege is doing, and it's honestly why, the Muninn application bonus is not always used, because commonly you can get full application on something like a Damavik. And because of that, what we care about most is mobility. So if you have a bunch of ghostings and tanglings in a room, you want to kill the webs, because as long as you can orbit at, say, 9 kilometers is what I have my orbit set to, you're going to force that target to Sigbloom, and you're going to hit them just fine. Something else you can do when looking at these spawns is get used to the numbers that appear commonly, because you'll get an idea of, well, I'm in Trig Armor, so this is the full value into that resist, and you can really kind of get a baseline of, okay, application's going okay, or I need to kind of change my tactic here. But yeah, really with these Kikimoras and Rodivas, I could pretty much just drop a tracked unit if I wanted to and sit on, or really just stop my ship. And then this Damavik, I'm going to try to force Sigbloom, so I'll orbit at 9 kilometers. Again, we're running an Afterburner here, so we want to be a lot more cognizant of where we are relative to the gate as we finish a room. So, with this Damavik or any target that can keep up with you, as long as that target's not really hurting you, you can always save that towards the end of the spawn, and then you kill it going back to the gate. Even if you don't have perfect application for that target, or maybe you lose some uptime, as long as you're not, burning so much time doing nothing in a room, you're still going to come out ahead. And honestly, a spawn where I think that is most critical is Karen, because if RNG is against you and Karen gets away from the gate in dark, you don't want to have to burn a minute or so going back to gate if she got a full 60 kilometers away. So for targets that can keep up with you, Ephies or maybe even these Scyllas, just leave them and just kill them after Karen. Karen, we don't have a clip of her in this set, but honestly, she's fairly straightforward. In 70%, she wants to orbit you just past 21 kilometers. In 50%, it's just past 30. And our heated webs go to 18. So in 70%, you can pretty much always grab her. If she's the second or third room, just use the full invuln period, and you're pretty much going to start right on top of her anyways. It's a good time to heat your AB as well. And again, if it's first room, 50%, it's not that hard to get a hold of her. And then once you get a hold of her with dual web, there's no amount of webs that are going to make you fall behind against her. Okay, drone frig room. We have a medium deviant tower. And I should swap to Navy here. Yeah, you're going to see me. I'm going to send drones after this cache. Swap to Mjolnir Navy. You could honestly do Nova or Mjolnir here. And if you're good with your Sigbloom, you can also just throw Rage. It's honestly not that much different. Yeah, actually, I clip a speed cloud here, and I'm pretty sure I just get to a point where, medium towers are not that amazing, and I don't want to be anywhere near that speed cloud, so I honestly think I start looking for the edge of this cloud, which there it was. It just passed on screen. I'm going to get away from it. I should drop the MTU. There is a blue cloud on the other side of the screen, but realistically, I'm still going to be more than fine on time in this room, especially with Navy loaded. I think I'll end up 3-shotting or 2-shotting these frigates. You could manually orbit these at 9 kilometers, but what I try to do, especially when promoting fits to Lurkers, is I try to find a tactic that you can easily replicate. So often what you'll see me do is drop an anchor like this MTU and then determine a range to orbit at, so that ideally your targets are always Sigblooming, but you're always in range of webs and missiles. And I think I'll usually start with a close orbit, then I'll start backing it out a little bit, and I'll just see how my application is. You can also do this on the outgate, but the outgate is a much larger object, so whereas I'm orbiting 500 meters here, and it's a tight orbit. You know, a 500 meter orbit on the gate is much larger. If we had decided to go to the blue cloud over there with dual web and rage, you'll just one-shot all of these Frigs. As always, you know, as long as you're moving, incoming damage in Dark is fairly low. I'm over-repping here. I believe there were strike lances in the spawn, which is technically our resist hole. But especially with the frigates, if you're just moving at all and their short-range blender is not sitting on you, then you're really okay. So in spawns where you are trying to deal with newts, especially with min-matar cap, you know, don't over-rep and just trust the amount of buffer that you have and just let that repper sit. You know, always know what percentage of armor your repper is going to give you so you don't over-rep, and that's really how we're going to get through the higher newt rooms, and you're going to see a spawn like that later in this clip. At this part of the spawn, I really should have scooped this MTU and just gone to the gate, but you know, similar to Alice in Wonderland, I may have good advice, but I don't always follow it. I'm just ultimately going to burn, you know, probably at least 30 seconds here. Hopefully I'll at least overheat this afterburner and get out of this room. What you see me do here with my cargo hold is, you know, similar with the Ikitursa. I'm kind of prepping to go into each new room. I'm reloading ammo, going with my default Nova here, and then I move my pack right up to the same spot. So that top row of my loot, you know, I don't sort anything. I pretty much don't look at my loot during the set because, again, I don't really care. And I want those top pieces to stay in the same spot. So if I'm going for the MTU, it's always in the same spot. You know, I don't really have issues with hitting the wrong filament because my filaments are always the first spot in my inventory. One thing you will find towards the end of your set of 4 runs in the Muninn, especially if you get a shipyard near the end, is, you know, I do carry a lot of missiles with me, and honestly, you probably don't even need this much, especially if you're, you know, dropping loot off, which is always the smarter play between runs. But say, you know, you've been getting side caches a bunch and you've got these crafting materials, it takes up a good bit of volume. So if you get a shipyard, you're going to want to practice the order that you are scooping that MTU and taking loot, because you might run out of cargo space. And obviously, when in doubt, ditch the T2 missiles because they're a decent bit of volume and they're very, very cheap. Here we have an FE room with a couple drifter cruisers. Drifter cruisers are pretty much no brain, dual web, apply full. You can actually get drone damage on them as well. FEs and Scyllas honestly like to go after drones. That, you know, they're not really going to kill them quick enough, but if you want targets to stay around you or stay in a blue cloud, just know that if you send drones out, the targets might be moving away from you. What I'm going to do is, you know, I'm going to kill this first drifter while I'm getting to where I want to go. Just again, so I don't have to think about it, because I want to put my focus elsewhere. I'm looking what else is in the spawn. I'm prioritizing, you know, not really being webbed down. There's no blue cloud in this room, which is what I'm always going to look for with the FEs, because with the FEs blue cloud, again, it's no brain dual web, and I will 4 volley them. But what you'll see me here is actually do what I'm talking about with sig blooming. So I'll set a 9-kilometer orbit against these FEs, dual web them, and I will 4 volley them. So, you know, I just said blue cloud is 4 volley, and that's going to be the same thing here. So this is effectively the same thing as a blue cloud. You know, occasionally you might spend an extra volley if, depending on how your webs land, because, you know, the ship needs to slow down and maybe they're not pluming. And ultimately, though, you're going to be okay on time. And here again, I think eventually I try to anchor up on this wreck similar to the rogue drones. Yeah, I do it right here, just to see if I can consistently force sig bloom while being in range. You know, they're cruisers, so they're going to be a little bit more, they're going to be slower than the drone frigs, so they may not keep up. And why I want this is because then if I can do it here, then I could probably go pretty close to gate and be very effective. Whereas if I'm doing a manual 9-kilometer orbit on Ephialtes, you know, I might be moving away from the gate, and, you know, I'm improving my application, but trading that for travel time. If there were confusers in this room, I would go with confusers first. Application is really not going to be too much of an issue, especially with our bonus. that bonus is going to be insurance for your application. And again, yeah, there's no amount of confusers where I'm going to swap off Rage for Ephies. The only time I might do it is if I'm seriously webbed down, but you know, these spawns kind of balance themselves out. If you have a lot of confusers, then you probably have less webs and vice versa. And honestly, I think if I were to swap to Navy here, I'm down to 1 volley more, so 5 volleys per Effie. So even worst case scenario with application and range, you're not that far behind. And you know, there is a lot of HP to get through here, but this room's not going to kill us. On that note, again, I'm over-repping here, but I used to talk about it a lot on stream, but pilot focus is a limited resource, and I'd rather just kind of no-brain my tank while I focus on damage and positioning. If there were a bunch of dissipators or null chargers in this spawn, I would be turning that rep off and relying a lot more on my buffer, and then just, you know, nothing is really going to seriously damage me or chunk me in this room, and I would just occasionally pulse it to get what I need. And again, I can always just run away. If there was a significant amount of newts, I will prioritize the newts because, again, the confusers are not truly hurting us on application. I would just knock the newts down enough to where I don't really have to think about tank again, and then I'll go back to my normal priority. Something else you'll probably see me do during this guide is whenever I have uniform resist enemies, I'll look at my stack of missiles, and then whatever is my highest stack, I'll probably just swap to it, just to, you know, make sure that I don't run out of Nova. We do run extra or bring extra Nova just in case that happens. I've never had it happen. I've gotten down pretty close, but you know, if I don't have to fire Nova and I've got a full stack of Inferno or Mjolnir, that's what I'll use instead. But if you don't want to think about it, just, again, default on Nova. Okay, new run here. I'm pretty sure I decide to go fight these drone Frigs in the blue cloud, so you should see me. Actually, no, I'm loading Navy. So yeah, I think what I end up doing here is I see that the blue cloud is a bit away from the gate. So yeah, one-tapping, it was nice. Usually when I'm one-tapping, I'm still waiting for the webs to decycle, so I'm not, you know, really that far ahead. So I might get a few in the blue cloud here, but then I'm just going to go to gate. I'm going to go probably loot. I'm going to go to gate and just trade some application for travel time. You'll see even once we get away from this blue cloud with Navy, this room really is not an issue with time, which I know something on like the Sac or the Cerb, sometimes people are worried about it, but with the right skills and, you know, standard crash and dual web, it's no problem. Application-wise, really what your worst case scenario would be a heavy lucid Frig room with no blue cloud. For me, it seems like I'm not so great at forcing sub blue on them. But if you just go to Navy, again, you're not really that far behind. It's not really a slow room. It might be a slower than average room, but you'll be okay. And then all the lucid cruisers, you just do web and you can kill them with rage. When you're looking through these spawns, you want to think about, you know, how many volleys do I have left, and you know, I don't want to add reloads to my run, so I can do this number of, you know, rage volleys into cruisers, and then I know I'll have to reload eventually before the end of this room, so I could just swap to Navy now and start hitting the Frigs. I mean, that stuff is usually not going to be what saves you if you were tight on time, but if you are trying to be efficient and, you know, you care about your clear times, then it is a way to optimize. Like I said in the Iki video, most rooms in the Muninn are going to be fairly the same. You don't have the same number of decisions you might want to make to optimize a spawn. But honestly, not everyone's looking for that experience. If you want a relatively chill setup that is just going to be a steady ISK maker, honestly, I think Dark Muninn is probably my favorite choice. Whereas if you ran the Sacrilege, you know, there's a little bit more decision making because you're going to run a medium smart bomb, and that will conflict with your drones, and you really want to get your drone DPS out there. So deciding when to use a smart bomb, when to use the drones, when to use both. And then the Sacrilege is actually, my sac fit compared to my Muninn fit is 20% slower when it comes to ship velocity, so positioning matters even more. And honestly, I think that's a good portion of why my average runtime in the Sac is 30 to 40 seconds slower as just travel time alone. And then the Cerb, you're going to be, your EHP in the shield is like half of what the Muninn and Sac have in armor. So, these larger hits is going to feel a little bit more dramatic, and you're going to want to respond each time you get a decent hit with your shield booster. But that's why a Cerb tank in Dark is going to look like it has much higher EHP compared to the armor fits, is because you can't float around with half shield in a Cerb. You could take a wrecking shot and bleed armor, and you can only do that so many times. But with that Cerb fit, you do have the ability to just immediately get shields, which is nice. Whereas with the armor, you want to plan ahead, know your amount. So it really is just what you prefer. We started this video with an Overmind, and honestly, I was really glad to get it again for the set. What you see me doing here is I use the full invuln period to get as close as possible to the Overmind. I swapped to Mjolnir Rage at the start, overheated the Afterburner as well, just to immediately get onto the target, because this is going to be one of our slower rooms when it comes to time. If there were repping frigates here, I would kill those first, just because, while they may not rep a whole lot, it does add up over the course of the room. I'm going to throw EM into this shield because we will have one reload against the Muninn, so let's optimize the shield. I will overheat here. I've got a pretty good idea of, if I go to that third tick on my high slot overheat monitor, I'm going to be right around 21% heat each time, so there's definitely still more I can go there. But as you go into the higher levels of heat, how that mechanic works is you're just going to do progressively more amounts of heat damage, and I just, obviously that's diminishing returns for what you're getting out of it, so I don't use it there. I have my tank off here, no real reason for this, just saving cap, I guess, kind of proving a point, as sometimes I do. You do want to get your drones on the target here, because you will get consistent drone damage against the Overmind, and T5 Overmind armor holes are kinetic and thermal. They're both the even values. They're not, that much behind explosive. They are a decent bit behind EM, but just 2% on this amount of EHP or HP can add up to a good bit of EHP towards by the time you end up killing this Overmind. Yeah, pretty straightforward. If you're thinking about going to T6, this is really what you need to address is, how long does it take to kill the Overmind? But you also have in this spawn 6 or 7 frigates that you need to deal with. Do you kill them first? Do you loot first? If I was really worried about time, since the Overmind is right on the gate, even though we're not that far away from the cache, I would send the drones to the cache really quick. I would drop this MTU on the gate, and just let it come to me. Since we are killing drones afterwards, excuse me, we're killing frigs afterwards, not worried about it because I'm probably going to reload. I am going to pop the cache and then pop the frigs while I loot. And then, so if our main limiting factor is our potential missile DPS, then that's why I'm overheating the Afterburner at the start, is I want to try to scrape back time anywhere I can. You don't have to do that, especially in Tier 5, you're going to be okay. But if you are looking at a T6 Muninn, I would take advantage of, getting time back wherever you can. Similar with the Ikitursa, where having the micro warp drive just saves us so much time. Ship velocity matters here. I did, when I was trialing and feeding a few Munins when I came back in 2025, I defaulted on the micro warp drive, which, it's great as a super fast ship. But the issue is then suddenly you have to deal with warp scrams, and we're not dealing with that anywhere else in our priority list. And if you remember, we want to maintain our mobility so that we can force Sig Bloom. And with the Afterburner and our Muninn speed, we can pretty much almost always force Sig Bloom on targets where we really need it. Whereas if you do the micro warp drive, you might get locked down, and you might just be stuck with, poor even Navy application with a frig that's not blooming around you. And at the end, it ends up being slower. It might be a little bit less fun going at Afterburner speeds, but I do believe this AB double web setup is the correct and most optimal way to play, at least at this budget. The other thing you want to look at for spending more money on going into T6 would be mutating your webs so that they get, they slow targets even more. The base web range we have at 14 kilometers is honestly more than enough. It's going to cover 95% of the enemies in the Abyss. So any range over that is, gravy. But if you can go up to the max amount of slow speed, you can actually hit what is essentially our cap on application when it comes to velocity in Dark. And then at that point, you're left with addressing sig radius. And along those same lines, that's why I believe Hydra is completely wasted on Muninn, because you hit that value and you're spending so much ISK on a setup that, most of the time it's just not using that bonus at all. So definitely go with the Skelepian. Really, you just don't need Hydra and the benefits that it brings. Okay, last room of this run, of this set. You could see going in that I had more than enough booster time to deal with pretty much anything this room threw at me. And then, again, sometimes I get complacent. I go into this room and I'm like, okay, it's just a Damavik room. I missed two things. One, there's a Vedmak in this room. And remember, once you start dunking the initial Damavik, swap to the Vedmaks, because that's what matters. And then there's actually a good bit of new pressure in this room. So I'm over-repping here for no reason. And it's just going to take me a minute to, wake up. One thing that is nice about starving Vedmaks in Dark is often, if left to their own orbit, they are not doing any damage to you. So I'm just burning cap and letting them nuke me for no reason. Whereas if I just turn off my tank, I'm going to be more than fine on cap. All we need really is the Afterburner and the webs. The Reactive Armor Hardener is giving us a lot of value, but if I was really in a bind, and because I want the webs more than anything, the webs in the prop mod more than anything, I will let that Reactive Armor Hardener drop off. Okay, now I'm catching up to the fact that, oh yeah, I should probably address all of these newts. Again, Minmatar cap. This is about the lowest capacitor you're going to probably bring into a Dark in a hack, and it's a single fleet large battery, so we have the lower resist choice of the faction options, but it's the higher buffer. We just need enough cap to get through this higher amount of newts. You can see my tank really is not moving. The Vedmak's already dead, and we're going to be more than fine now that I have actually addressed what's going on in the room. The rest of the spawn is really just me doing what I've talked about previously, not over-repping. I'm going to force Sig Bloom on these Damaviks. You can see that I'm hitting these Damaviks for the same amount that I'm hitting the Vedmaks for most of the time. And I want to say my bloomed Damavik volley count is 4, so it's essentially the same as Ephi's. And then I believe I have some rogue drones here too, and I will eventually just kill them based on what I have left. I think when I get through most of my missiles here, I actually swap to Navy, so I'll accept, a slower kill count on the Damavik, but I can think a little bit less about my DPS and application and start focusing on getting out of here. I actually go to an extraction node here, and I will be rewarded with 0 loot. RNG giveth, RNG taketh away. Yeah, now we're going to just start going back to gate. That's pretty much it. Honestly, there's less decision making to go into the Muninn. Be cognizant of your cap. Don't over-rep. Try to get the most you can out of your application. Take advantage of your selectable damage type. Take advantage of your drones. Drones aren't great in Dark, but they do provide some DPS. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. Muninn's a great ship. If you want to get started in Dark and don't want to jump into something like the Ikitursa, this is where I would go. Thanks for hanging out for yet another long video. I'm not a regular content creator, so like, subscribe, do all that stuff, but ultimately, as long as if you enjoy the content or you have questions, really what I care about is engaging with everyone in Lurkers or on YouTube. So you can hit me up in game, hit me up in our Discord. You can obviously hit me up in comments. If you have questions, honestly, just love talking about the Abyss and fitting in general. If you do want to support me, and it's never necessary. But if you do want to, I'll have a referral link in the description. But yeah, thanks everyone. I will catch you around.